Here's the best love and money advice I've ever received. I've only been married for going on 3 years now, and I feel like I have a lot to learn, but I've always been someone who loves collecting advice and hearing other people's stories and experiences and successes and failures, and then tried to learn from everything that I've collected over the years. So I love the topic of hearing other people's stories and their experiences. And that's really what has helped me navigate the waters of being married and then merging two sets of finances together. It's been an experience and definitely a challenge, but overall a joy and something that I have really enjoyed doing. But again, I really rely heavily on the wisdom of people who have come before me and have done that successfully, and trying to learn from the failures that I've seen or things that I don't want to incorporate. So focusing more on what I do want to keep in my life and in my relationship, and especially our relationship with money, and then releasing things that don't serve so well. So the very best piece of advice on relationships I've ever heard is so simple and so profound. It was a couple in their 90s, and they had been married for 70 years. So it was a gentleman, a man and a woman talking to each other, and the interviewer asked them what was the best piece of advice that they could pass on, and the woman said, just be nice to each other. Just be nice to each other. I thought, how profound, and yet how wise, and yet simple. Sometimes easier said than done, but overall I think that's the most important thing to remember, is that just being kind and polite to one another is definitely the best foundation for a lasting relationship and love, and especially surrounding money. Just being kind to one another and respecting and honoring each other. Not even the respect and honor, just being kind to each other. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your relationship and your love. The second piece of advice was from my uncle, and it was given to my husband when we got married. My uncle is in his late 80s at the time, was in his late 80s, and he said to my husband, just give in. That was his advice, just give in. And sometimes I wish that he would take that advice more often, but overall, the idea is that I want to focus on things that are important and give in on absolutely everything else. And I am someone that often likes to sweat the small stuff. So for me, it's really important to remember that almost all of it is small stuff, and the important stuff is really few and far between. But to know what that important stuff is, which brings me to the third piece of advice that I got, which was from one of my favorite books on relationships, which is How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It. I have it right here. And things are great. There's always room for improvement in every relationship. And I feel like this is just the best book, because sometimes more words get in the way of good communication, is a quote I heard from one of my dear friends. So this book emphasizes focusing on the common values and the things that you share, your core values, and letting everything else go. Again, focusing on what's most important to the both of you, and then letting everything else go. And really being in a place of approach and wonder and question rather than judgment, which again, I'm someone that tends to slip into that judgment mode way too easily. And for me, it's really helpful to remember that I want to come from a place of kindness and approach, going back to that very first piece of advice, just be nice and focus on what really matters. The fourth piece of advice is really more on relationships, but applies to almost everything, and that is to focus on living my own best life. We came to the marriage in separate, with a lot of life behind us, with finances that we were looking to merge. And I think for me, it was focusing on how do we work as a team and not getting caught up again in any of the small stuff, because it was very easy, again, for me to get caught up in things that don't really matter. And what really matters is that we are working together as a team, and then on everything else, I can live my own life and release what isn't important. So that's one of the best pieces of advice I got. The relationship coach is Adrienne Everhart. She is really wonderful for women. She's focused on women and femininity and feminine energy. And For me, that means being in a place of warmth and receiving as opposed to judgment and harshness. So that was really good advice from her, to live my own rich, juicy life. And then the final piece of advice that resonated with me was just from a random internet search that, again, stuck with me, but encompasses all of these pieces of advice on love and money, and that is not to sweat the small stuff. And 99% of it is small stuff. For example, who cares about the way, I don't really care about the way things are picked up or the dishes are put away. I think for the most part, I've gotten better about releasing the small stuff, but sometimes I will think, particularly when it comes to what we're eating, that's a big thing for me, because I'm in charge of almost, I'll give you an example, almost all of our food. That's just an area that's easier to me because I have more flexibility. So I try to eat very healthy, very focused on protein and vegetables. This is a long story, but I'll get to the point. My husband loves sweets, and he doesn't love eating them. He just likes having them in the house. So he can just have something in the house and then it'll go bad. Like, he'll buy a beautiful strawberry shortcake and it'll sit in the fridge and go bad because he just buys it and likes to have it. I am not someone who can do that. That is very frustrating to me, because I will eat the whole thing in one sitting and then hate myself afterwards. But he has the ability to just do that. And I've asked him not to do that, and I'm like, you know what? It's not really a big deal. It is just something that I will release as being small stuff, and then we'll go and enjoy our dinner together and our time just hanging out and enjoying each other's company. And that is something that I have learned, and a way that I've learned to release everything else that's not small and focus on what is the most important. So that is the best love and money advice that I have heard in the time that I've been collecting this advice. If you have any great tips, let me know. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll keep watching.